My name's Seth. This is Hiroki. This piece of work is based on a previous ALIFE paper that Hiroki authored. I think it was a single author paper. And so when I'd started work on this, I kind of reached out to him when I started to get some results, and we've been collaborating on it. So I'm from the University of Bristol. Hiroki is actually from Binghamton University and has an association with a Japanese university too, which you can see on the screen. So I'm going to hand over to Hiroki to introduce the model, and then I'll tell you what happened.
Okay, thank you, Seth. So it's very unlikely that usually you have the multiple speakers for the academic conference. This is like a student project presentation. I like it. Yeah. So thanks to Seth, he continued working on the previous model we created. That was the model I published a couple of years ago. So first, I'm going to explain the basic model is, and then what we did. So that's going to be Seth's part. So essentially, is it working? Yeah. Oh, it's kind of slow. Yeah. So we are interested in modeling the social fragmentation. As we know, everywhere in the world is collapsing. Yeah, because of the many technological issues. And this is one example. The US is very well known for this kind of crazy behavior, but it's not about the politics or the ideology. It can happen also in some very benign behavior things like food choices or fashion trends or etc. Yeah, my favorite is this one. Nobody knows what this is. It's called the decorated vans, the culture in Japan. So people can actually go very extreme, even though they have no intention to go extreme, right? So we are trying to understand how, does the social fragmentation arise deliberately by someone who is trying to instigate that kind of thing, or is it more like a self-organized behavior? So that was the main motivation of the previous paper. And this paper, this year, so we introduced an additional thing, which is the heterogeneity of the behavior. So that's going to be the main topic Seth is going to talk about. And to understand the basic model, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes to explain the basic model first. This is the main motivation of this particular paper about the heterogeneity of the behavior of the people. How does it impact on our social network evolution, right? So the research objective of this paper is about studying the agent-based model of the adaptive social network models. Adaptive social network is the co-evolutionary model in which the states and the network topologies co-evolve simultaneously. And there are many key ingredients, behavioral parameters we have in this model. And the main objective of this particular paper this year is to study the effect of the last one, the agent heterogeneity. Okay, let's get to the model. So model is adaptive networks. Nothing to do with neural networks. This is more like a simulation model in which states of nodes and the link weights of the network co-evolve simultaneously. So this is the general name of such kind of category of the models. And the specific model we have been studying is a bunch of differential equations. It's basically the high dimensional differential equation based model where X is the opinion of each node. W is the link weight from node J to node I. Or I to J, I forgot which is which. But they both behave by following this kind of differential equations. Simply, node state going to be following your social neighbor's average. So this is social conformity. You become like your friends. And then this, by the way, this is the local average. By looking at your social neighbors, you calculate the weighted average. And then link weights going to also behave based on the homophily and the attention to novelty. I'm going to explain this in a moment. So, yep. So I think, yeah. So these are the visual representations. So your link weights will be increasing if you have the closer opinion between you and your neighbor. That's a homophily. And this is the opposite, almost opposite, sorry. Oh, yeah, animation, cool animation. Thank you, Seth. So the attention novelty is that you're going to increase your link weight if you see someone's opinion is standing out compared to your others in your social neighborhood. So, and also that we have the parameters in front of each of those terms. So they actually decide the strength of each of the behavior parameters, okay, behavioral effects. So going back to the equation, you see these two terms represent how the link weight is going to increase or decrease based on the homophily as well as attention to novelty, right? So the basic model parameters here are these three: C for conformity levels, and the H for homophily levels, and the A for attention to novelty levels. So these are three different parameters we are mostly concerned about. And with that, I think, oh yeah, I think this is going to be the last slide I need to explain, right? The basic behavior of this model, if you change the parameter values appropriately, you may see that the fragmentation of society or the complete homogenization of society. So this has been known as the social fragmentation transition in the literature. Okay. With that, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Thank you. So yeah, so the change that I wanted to introduce is extremely simple, really. Previously, Hiroki had explored homogeneous networks. So we had looked at the sweep across those 5 parameters, but each simulation, all the nodes have the same parameters. So their tendency to conformity, their tendency towards homophily, their tendency to have an attention for novelty was the same as all their neighbors. They differed in their opinions and they differed in who they connected to, but the way that they changed was the same. But it feels like that's not the case. And one of the things that is driving the kind of weird social fragmentation that we see in the real world is because people are updating their opinions and changing their connections in different ways. So what we want to do is assign to each node unique independent values for those parameters, those 3 important parameters, the strength of conformity, the strength of homophily, and the strength of their attention to novelty. So it's relatively easy to do that. And then we can run, we allocate nodes, those parameters from some distribution, we run the network, and then we can do statistics to work out whether, to what extent those different tendencies drive structures in the network, and to what extent those different tendencies result in nodes being connected together. So this slide is a bit busy. The only thing that you really need to see is we're looking at 1,000 node networks. We're running them for 1,000 updates. We're keeping those 2 thresholds that I kind of animated in a slightly jerky way constant. So those 2 parameters out of the 5 main parameters are fixed for everybody. We start with random opinions allocated to all the nodes. We start with random weights allocated to all the nodes. And in the heterogeneous case, we start with random update policies allocated to all the nodes. We draw their conformity, homophily, and attention to novelty from a uniform distribution. But we also run a kind of null network alongside where all of the nodes have the same update policy, which is the mean of what is happening in the heterogeneous case. So quite straightforward. We get behavior that looks a little like this. These are 100 node networks, just to make the visualization a little easier to follow. So after they settle down, we start to see the homogeneous network assorting on opinion, right? These red guys like to be attached to other red guys. These blue guys like to be attached to other blue guys. Whereas over here, we're seeing more integration, right? We're still seeing assortativity. Blue guys are on this side, reddish guys are on this side, but a lot of nodes are bundled together in the middle because they like to be connected quite widely. Okay, so what does that look like when we move to the full 1,000 node system? So we start to see some differences. So here, the shape of each node is the community that our community detection algorithm puts them into. So there's a square community, which I've always felt part of. There's a circular community in the middle here, and there's a triangle community. That's just based on who is connected to who. We color the shapes based on their opinion. So if you have an extremely negative opinion, you are red. If you have an extremely positive opinion, you are blue. These guys range from sort of bluey green down to kind of orange. So they're somewhere in the middle of this range. Here you can see more of the extreme colors. There are some dark blues, there are some dark reds. And the algorithm that lays them out is trying to place nodes near to each other if they are connected. So we're getting quite different outcomes. Over here, essentially, the structure is more integrated. So here we can see the structure is kind of laid out in a sausage with a community at one end and a community at the other end. Those are not particularly connected, whereas it's struggling to lay out these communities because they're more integrated. And in terms of the opinions on the network, we're seeing more extreme opinions in this network, the heterogeneous network, than we are over here, despite the fact that on average, there's as much conformity on this side, there's as much homophily in both cases, right? It's just the distribution that is changing. So we can do a little bit of statistics. The heterogeneous case means we're going to have stronger connectivity. There's a denser set of weights. We're going to have more segregation in the homogeneous situation. So what that means is there's more assortativity by opinion. So if there are two nodes that have the same opinion, they're much more likely to be strongly connected in the homogeneous case. In the heterogeneous case, we're going to see more communities, smaller communities, but they're going to overlap more. They're more connected together. In the homogeneous case, we see larger, fewer, stronger communities. And finally, and maybe importantly, in the heterogeneous case, the range of opinions, the mean opinions of the communities has a bigger range. We see more extreme communities. And within each community, nodes can have opinions that have a wider spread. So we see more deviance within each community. So that's an interesting combination of things. We can also look at where the different strategies end up in the network. So here I've changed the glyph that I'm using from a shape to a letter. The C's are nodes with an abnormally high degree of conformity. The H are the ones that were just accidentally given a high degree of homophily. And the A's, which you can only really see if you pay attention, they're right there in the middle. These are the ones with the high attention to novelty. And the layout algorithm has to place them in the middle because they're connecting a whole bunch of little communities. So that's a structural kind of fact. And in terms of opinions, the extreme colors, the strong reds and strong blues, tend to be your high homophily nodes. So it's kind of easy to understand. If you have very strong homophily, you're only prepared to be connected to someone who is very similar to you. You want to build connections to someone very similar. So you tend to form small, tight, and if you happen to have an extreme opinion, you're going to tend to be able to persist with that opinion because you only connect with individuals that have a similar opinion to you. We can also look at somewhat more subtle things. To what extent are there strong weights between nodes that have high conformity? Is the network assorted on conformity? So it's positively assorted on conformity and attention to novelty. Those nodes tend to want to be connected together. And it's negatively assorted on homophily, because if you have very strong homophily, someone else has very strong homophily, you have to be very lucky to have the same opinion and want to connect with them. We can also look at the kind of communities that are encouraged by these different strategies. So conformists end up in large, loose-knit conformist communities with low opinion diversity. Homophily, high homophily individuals end up in deviant communities. It's very fun using these words, right? Deviance and extremism. We could also think of this, though, as just they have an outlier innovation in a more positive framing. And these high attention to novelty nodes tend to end up in these intercommunities, small, tight-knit, assorted with high opinion diversity because they exist at the boundaries between other bigger communities. Okay, so the main thing I think that we found is that you can make sense of injecting heterogeneity into these kind of models is relatively easy, and simple multiple linear regression models can pull out some of these influences that heterogeneity is having. So we see homophily driving fragmentation, extremism, and diversity, which has been seen before. And we see neophily, this attention to novelty, having a more subtle role, but they basically are crucial. They prevent or they drive down segregation. They limit the assortativity. So there's more of a tendency for nodes to be friends with other nodes that have a different opinion because of the presence of neophilic nodes. And they maintain diversity within agent social environments. So all of those are things that social platforms struggle with, right? The kind of assortativity that's generated by Twitter making suggestions based on trying to connect you to someone who is very similar is precisely working against this type of factor. But a positive result from this is you don't have to have everybody increase their attention to novelty in order to resist fragmentation. You just need some individuals with strong attention to novelty. They can serve as useful bridges for these communities. So, finishing up, heterogeneity in the update policies. So there's always been heterogeneity in the opinions in opinion dynamics models, but here the policies that allow nodes to change their opinion and change their connectivity has systematic impact that you can track using very simple statistics. In this case, uniform heterogeneity drives up extremism. We see more extreme opinions, we see more extreme communities, but simultaneously inhibits fragmentation at the global scale, these networks are more connected because there's a sort of non-linear influence of the nodes with outlier values for attention to novelty. So yeah, attention to novelty emerges again, I think, as a key factor that maybe has not received as much attention. It's important to note the unique, the kind of specific distribution that you draw these strategies from makes a difference. If I draw them from a normal distribution of various kinds, then a lot of these results change. And really, this is a platform for doing more interesting things next. So an obvious thing to do is endogenize these update policies, right? How do nodes arrive at their update policies? They learn them from their parents, right? Or maybe they have a certain update policy when they're young and their brains are nice and flexible, but their update policy is different by the time they get old, like me. So we can add that to the model. I'm also keen on embedding the whole model in space. So clearly, currently, our nodes can make connections with any node at all. Every connection is equally available. But that's not true in the real world. We have spatial constraints on who we can form strong connections with. So in some sense, the communities are pre-formed by the distribution of nodes in space. To what extent is that bootstrapping this process or frustrating it? And finally, at the moment, every agent's opinion is just a single scalar value. But I have my political opinions. I also have a favorite football team. So those, and when I meet somebody, a combination of those opinions might influence how I change my relationship to them. I'm very interested in situations where people with opposed politics might actually be prepared to talk about that if they happen to support the same football team. So at the moment, the model can't handle that, but it's relatively easy to add multiple, to have a vector of X values for each node. So that's what's coming next. Thank you very much.